What if the person you are today isn't fixed but quietly, silently, being rewritten by the smallest choices you make? Think about it. The way you react to a delay, the thoughts you entertain when no one's watching, the split-second decision to pause instead of react. These moments seem insignificant, but stacked together, they're the invisible architects of your identity. And here's the surprising truth. The ancient Stoics knew this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That power isn't about grand gestures or loud declarations. It's in the subtle shifts, the silent recalibrations of how you see the world and yourself. This isn't just philosophy, it's a quiet revolution. Imagine waking up one day and realizing the person you've become isn't who you were a year ago, not because of some dramatic event, but because of 27 barely noticeable changes. A slight shift in perspective here, a deeper breath there, a refusal to let frustration dictate your actions. These are the Stoic shifts, small, deliberate, and utterly transformative. They don't demand attention, but over time they recode everything: how you handle stress, how you define success, even how you see your own potential. And the most powerful part, no one else has to notice. This work happens in the stillness, in the space between stimulus and response, where you choose who you're becoming. That's what this journey is about, not quick fixes or surface-level hacks, but the kind of changes that sink deep, rewiring your instincts and reshaping your identity from the inside out. We're diving into 27 of these subtle Stoic shifts, practices and perspectives borrowed from the greats like Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, but tailored for the chaos of modern life. Some will challenge you, others will feel like quiet permission to let go of what's been holding you back, but all of them share one thing: they work in silence without fanfare, until one day you look in the mirror and recognize someone wiser, steadier, and more at peace. If that sounds like the kind of change you've been waiting for, you're in exactly the right place. Let's begin. The first shift begins before the world wakes up, in those fragile moments of morning silence. Seneca called this the sacred space between sleep and society, where you reclaim your mind before the day claims it. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest nourishment and little of it." But here's the modern translation. It's not about starving the body, it's about feeding the mind first. Before you reach for your phone, before the noise of notifications and to-do lists floods in, there's a Stoic practice hiding in plain sight: 5 minutes of pure, unbroken stillness. Not meditation, not journaling, though those are powerful too, just silence, letting your thoughts settle like sediment in water until you can see clearly what's beneath the surface. Why does this matter? Because how you start your morning is how you start your life. Every day you're handed a blank slate, but most of us scribble over it with other people's priorities before we've even had a chance to think. The Stoics knew this 2,000 years ago. They called it the disciplina matutina, the morning discipline. It wasn't about productivity hacks or grinding harder. It was about creating a buffer between the world's chaos and your inner calm. Imagine standing at the edge of a lake at dawn, watching the mist rise. That's what these 5 minutes can be, a chance to let the turbulence of yesterday settle so you can face today with clarity. So here's the challenge. Tomorrow, when you wake up, don't let the world in just yet. Sit with the quiet, listen to your breath instead of your inbox. And ask yourself this: what distractions have I been letting colonize my mornings? Is it the reflexive scroll through social media, the urgent but not important emails that hijack your attention? Or maybe it's the mental chatter of everything you should be doing, which leaves no room for what you want to become. Those 5 minutes of silence aren't just a pause, they're a rebellion. A way to rewrite the script of your day before anyone else gets to draft it for you. Because in the end, the person you're becoming is shaped most by what you do when no one's watching, and nothing is louder than the choices you make in the quiet. Now let's talk about the second shift, the one that feels counterintuitive at first but changes everything once you embrace it. The Stoics called it Amor Fati, the love of fate. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, put it bluntly: do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to, rather, wish that what happens happens the way it happens, then you will be happy. But here's the twist: this isn't about passive acceptance. It's about actively seeking discomfort, not because you enjoy suffering, but because you recognize it as the whetstone that sharpens your resilience. Think of it like this: every time you choose the harder path, taking the cold shower instead of the warm one, walking past the dessert you crave, or leaving your phone untouched for an hour, you're not just building discipline. You're rewriting your relationship with discomfort itself. Most of us spend our lives avoiding minor hardships, only to crumble when real challenges arise. The Stoics flipped that script. They practiced voluntary discomfort not as punishment but as preparation. Seneca slept on the floor some nights. Musonius Rufus ate simple, unseasoned food. These weren't acts of self-denial. They were rehearsals for life's inevitable storms. Here's the modern equivalent: skipping breakfast once a week to remind yourself hunger won't break you. Or deleting social media apps for a weekend to prove you're not enslaved to the dopamine hits. These small acts of resistance train your mind the way lifting weights trains your body. The discomfort is the point, not because it's pleasant, but because it teaches you one critical lesson: you can endure far more than you think. Every time you voluntarily step into discomfort, you're proving to yourself that external conditions don't dictate your peace. So ask yourself this: where could you introduce a small, deliberate dose of discomfort today? Maybe it's turning off the heater in your car for your morning commute, feeling the chill as a reminder that you're alive. Maybe it's waiting an extra hour before checking your email, sitting with the itch of uncertainty instead of scratching it immediately. These choices seem insignificant, but they're stealthy acts of rebellion against a culture that equates comfort with happiness. The Stoics knew better. They understood that true freedom isn't found in avoiding hardship, it's found in knowing, deep in your bones, that hardship can't break you unless you let it. This is Amor Fati in action, not just accepting what life throws at you, but sometimes throwing it at yourself first. Because when you learn to love the grind, the cold, the hunger, the waiting, you stop fearing them. And in that fearlessness, you find something far more valuable than comfort: unshakable confidence in your own strength. The third shift is where philosophy meets the pulse, the space between what happens to you and how you respond. The Stoics called it Prosoch, the art of attention, that deliberate pause where you reclaim sovereignty over your reactions. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly: you always own the option of having no opinion. Things themselves cannot touch the soul, but here's what that looks like in practice: when criticism lands at work, when a stranger cuts you off in traffic, or when someone says the one thing that makes your jaw clench, there's a hidden doorway in that moment. A fraction of a second where you can choose to step back instead of lurching forward. This isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about inserting a buffer between stimulus and response. Picture it like a mental airlock. When pressure builds a harsh email, a snide comment, instead of letting it flood your system, you activate the pause. One breath, 2, 3, just enough to let the heat of the moment dissipate. The ancient Stoics didn't have neuroscience, but they understood what we now know. That pause is where the prefrontal cortex catches up to the amygdala's alarm bells. It's the difference between saying, "I need a moment to process that," and firing off a reply you'll regret by lunchtime. Consider a real-world test. Your boss dismisses an idea you spent weeks refining. The instinct is to defend, to prove your worth. But what if instead you borrowed Marcus Aurelius's lens? What stands in the way becomes the way, and treated the criticism as data, not a dagger. That pause lets you ask, is there truth here I can use, or is this about their perspective, not my value? Either way, you've turned a reaction into a response. So here's your challenge. Think of a recent moment where your reaction didn't serve you. Maybe it was snapping at a loved one over something trivial or spiraling over a minor setback. Now rewrite it with the pause. How would it have changed if you'd taken those 3 breaths? The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. Because every time you exercise that pause, you're not just avoiding a misstep, you're reinforcing a neural pathway that says, I am not my impulses. And over time, those pauses add up to something profound. The quiet confidence of knowing you're no longer at the mercy of every passing storm. This is Prosoch in action. Not indifference, but intentionality. Not control over the world, but mastery over your place in it. Because the person you're becoming isn't shaped by what happens to you. It's defined by what happens in that sacred space between. The 4th shift turns your journal into something far more powerful than a diary. It becomes a mirror, one that reflects not just your day, but the hidden architecture of your thoughts. Marcus Aurelius never intended his meditations to be published. Those pages were his private wrestling ground, where he confronted his own contradictions and clarified what truly mattered. And here's the key, his journal wasn't about recording events, it was about dissecting his reactions to them. That's the Stoic difference. While modern diary apps nudge you to document what happened, Stoic journaling asks a sharper question: what did I control? Picture this, at the end of a frustrating day, most people would write, "My boss criticized my presentation." A Stoic adds a layer. I couldn't control their reaction, but I controlled how much I prepared and how I let their words affect me after. That subtle pivot changes everything. It transforms the journal from a passive record into an active tool for self-awareness. Seneca called this practice evening introspection, a chance to review the whole day's deeds and words before sleep. But unlike scrolling through your phone's screen time report, this isn't about tallying productivity. It's about spotting patterns, the moments you handed your piece to someone else's opinion, or the times you mistook effort for progress. Try this tonight. Put your phone away an hour earlier and grab a notebook, no apps, no algorithms. Write down one prompt. Where did I confuse control with concern today? Maybe it was replaying a coworker's offhand comment on loop, or refreshing your inbox for a reply that didn't come. The magic isn't in the answer, it's in the act of asking. Over time, these pages reveal something startling: how much of your mental real estate you've leased to things that don't deserve it. Modern journaling often becomes another performance, curated gratitude lists for Instagram, or venting into apps that gamify emotions with streaks and badges. Stoic journaling strips all that away. It's raw, unfiltered, and uncomfortably honest, because when you write for an audience, even an audience of one, you start editing your truth. But when you write to understand, you uncover the stories you've been telling yourself, like how "I had no choice" really means "I chose the path of least resistance," or "they made me angry" hides the quieter truth, "I let them." So here's the challenge. For the next 7 nights, end your day with ink instead of pixels. Don't just recount events, interrogate them. When you catch yourself writing, "I was so stressed," press deeper. What did I believe about this situation that made stress inevitable? The revelations won't always be flattering, that's the point. Growth lies in the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be on social media. Your journal is where that pretense falls away, leaving only the one thing that matters, the chance to do better tomorrow. This is journaling as the Stoics intended, not self-help, but self-confrontation, because the person you're becoming deserves more than a highlight reel. They deserve the truth. There's a quiet rebellion hidden in the fifth shift, one that doesn't demand you give up what you have, but asks instead, why do you think you need more? The Stoics called this Eudemonia, a flourishing life, and it had nothing to do with the size of your house or the buzz of notifications on your phone. Seneca, who lived in the excess of imperial Rome, wrote to his friend Lucilius, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." That craving, the restless itch for the next purchase, the next milestone, the next hit of external validation, is the very thing Stoic contentment dismantles. Consider your workspace. The average desk is a battlefield of half-empty water bottles, tangled cables, and sticky notes shouting urgent but forgotten tasks. Now imagine stripping it down to just three things: what you use daily, what brings you joy, and what serves a purpose. The clutter isn't just physical, it's mental. Each unnecessary object is a tiny demand on your attention, a whisper of you should or you could. The Stoics didn't advocate minimalism for aesthetics. They practiced it as a form of mental hygiene. When Seneca advised, set aside a portion of your riches for the soul, he wasn't talking about money. He meant clearing space literally and figuratively for what actually matters. Here's the paradox: the less you need, the more you have. Not in possessions, but in freedom from comparison, from maintenance, from the quiet dread of not enough. Modern consumerism thrives on manufactured lack. Your phone is outdated after a year. Your wardrobe is incomplete without this season's trends. Your happiness is always one purchase away. The Stoic alternative: define enough on your own terms. For Marcus Aurelius, it was a simple bowl and cloak. For you, it might mean recognizing that chasing a promotion you don't actually want is just another form of clutter. So try this experiment. Pick one area, your desk, your closet, even your calendar, and ask of each item or commitment, does this add value or just occupy space? You'll uncover two truths. First, how much you've accumulated simply because it was there. Second, how light you feel when you let go of what you never needed in the first place. Because contentment isn't found in acquiring, it's found in realizing you already have what's essential. This shift isn't about deprivation, it's about discernment. The next time you're tempted to add something to your life, whether it's a gadget, a goal, or a grievance, pause. Ask Seneca's question: is this purchase, this pursuit, this worry making me freer or just busier? The answer will tell you everything about who you're becoming. The sixth shift unfolds in the space between words where most people wait to speak, but Stoics choose to listen. Epictetus, who taught in the crowded streets of ancient Greece, gave his students a radical challenge. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. At first glance, it sounds like simple etiquette, but dig deeper and you'll find a masterclass in human connection. Modern conversations have become a battlefield of interruptions, half-formed replies, and the unspoken race to prove who's smarter or funnier. The Stoic alternative: listening not to win but to understand. Think about the last time someone cut you off mid-sentence. Now flip it. When did you last interrupt someone because your point felt too urgent to wait? There's a hidden cost to these tiny conversational power grabs. Every time you prioritize your voice over another's, you're not just being rude, you're missing a chance to learn. The Stoics saw listening as an act of humility, a way to dismantle the ego's insistence that your perspective is the only one that matters. Seneca put it bluntly, while we teach, we learn. But you can't learn if you're too busy rehearsing your rebuttal. Here's the practice that changes everything. Count to 3 before responding, not as a pause to plan your comeback, but as a sacred buffer to absorb what was actually said. In those 3 seconds, magic happens. You might notice the hesitation in their voice that contradicts their confident words, or the unspoken need behind their complaint. Most people listen just long enough to categorize a statement as agree or disagree. Stoics listen for what's unstated, the fears, values, and assumptions hiding between syllables. Try this today. In your next conversation, let silence linger a heartbeat longer. Watch how often the other person reveals something deeper when given room to breathe. The barrister who mentions her son's soccer game isn't just making small talk, she's offering a thread of connection. The colleague who vents about a project might really be asking, am I doing this right? Modern life trains us to skim conversations like headlines. Stoicism teaches us to read between the lines. So ask yourself, who have you truly listened to lately? Not just heard, but absorbed. Not to fix their problems or one-up their story, but to witness their humanity, because every person you meet is a walking library of experiences you'll never live. And when you listen, really listen, you gain access to shelves of wisdom you'd otherwise miss. That's the quiet power of this shift. It turns ordinary chats into portals of understanding, one intentional pause at a time. The 7th shift cuts straight to the core of an invisible burden most of us carry, the weight of opinions that aren't ours. Marcus Aurelius scribbled a line in his private journal that stings even 2 millennia later. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Beneath the surface, he's pointing to a radical truth: how much of your mental energy is spent rehearsing conversations that never happened, or crafting defenses against judgments no one actually made. Social media didn't invent this trap, it just digitized it. Scrolling through curated highlight reels, it's easy to mistake others' milestones for your own inadequacies. But here's the Stoic antidote. Indifference isn't apathy. It's the deliberate act of returning your attention to what you can actually shape: your own actions, your own standards, your own peace. Take a mundane example. You post a photo and the likes trickle in slower than expected. The modern mind spirals. Was it the lighting? Did I offend someone? The Stoic response starts with a question. Why does a stranger's double tap hold power over your sense of worth? Marcus called gossip and others' opinions nothing but noise, and he ruled an empire. Yet how many of us, with far smaller domains, let casual comments from coworkers or vague subtweets hijack our focus for hours? The shift here isn't about blocking out feedback, it's about filtering it through a single lens. Does this help me grow or just shrink my confidence? Try this experiment for one day. Track how often you imagine others' judgments. The coworker who didn't laugh at your joke, the friend who left your message on read. Each assumption is a thread you've woven into a story they never wrote. Now ask, what would change if I cared as little about their opinions as they do about mine? The freedom in that question isn't theoretical. It's the difference between living by your own compass and constantly recalibrating to invisible standards. This shift reveals a quiet irony. The people whose approval you crave likely aren't thinking about you at all. They're too busy worrying about who's thinking about them. The Stoics broke this chain by practicing what they called adiaphora, the art of labeling external things as neither good nor bad, but indifferent. Your boss's mood, your neighbor's new car, the viral post you didn't make, none define you unless you let them. So here's the challenge. Next time you catch yourself overanalyzing a sideways glance or a lukewarm response, borrow Epictetus's bluntness. If someone spoke badly of you and it's true, correct yourself. If it's a lie, laugh at it. The world will always have opinions. Your power lies in choosing which ones deserve rent-free space in your mind. Because the person you're becoming isn't built on applause. They're built on the quiet certainty of knowing their own worth. The eighth shift flips the script on adversity, not by denying its sting, but by asking what it might be trying to teach you. The Stoics called this the obstacle is the way, a philosophy crystallized by Marcus Aurelius when he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. Consider Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who faced exile, political sabotage, and ultimately death for his principles. Where others saw defeat, Cato saw refinement. When forced to march barefoot across the desert, he didn't curse the sand, he used it to toughen his feet. When his enemies mocked him, he replied, "They hate me because they fear me." His life was a masterclass in alchemy, turning barriers into bridges. Now fast forward to a modern office. A promotion slips through your fingers, or a project you poured months into gets cancelled. The initial reaction is grief, maybe resentment, but the Stoic shift kicks in when you ask, what if this isn't a detour but the actual path? That failed pitch might reveal gaps in your skill set you'd ignored. The rejected proposal could push you toward an industry better aligned with your values. Even the colleague who undermines you becomes a mirror, reflecting where you still seek external validation. Here's the practice. Take any current struggle, a strained relationship, a financial hurdle, a creative block, and dissect it with 3 questions. 1. What part of this can I control? Your effort, your attitude, your next move. 2. What's this revealing about my blind spots? Maybe you've outgrown a role or relied too heavily on approval. 3. How could this obstacle secretly serve me? A layoff forces entrepreneurship. A rejection frees you for a better fit. The twist, this isn't toxic positivity. The Stoics weren't suggesting you pretend to enjoy pain, they were urging you to use it. Like a blacksmith's forge, the heat of adversity tempers you into something stronger. When the startup founder's first venture collapses, they gain scars but also insight no MBA can teach. When the artist's work is ignored, they learn the difference between creating for applause and creating for purpose. So pause here, name one obstacle in your life right now. Not the cosmic injustice you can't change, but the challenge within your sphere of influence. Then reframe it as Cato might, not as a wall, but as a whetstone, because the person you're becoming isn't forged in comfort. They're shaped by how you meet the friction the world throws your way and whether you let it polish you instead of break you. The 9th shift isn't about suppressing anger, it's about outsmarting it. Seneca, who wrote an entire treatise on the subject, called anger a brief madness, and his solution was disarmingly simple: delay. Not denial, not explosion, but the deliberate insertion of time between provocation and response. He advised, the greatest remedy for anger is to wait. In a world where instant reactions are rewarded with likes and retweets, this might be the most countercultural Stoic practice of all. Picture this. You've just received an email that makes your pulse spike, a colleague taking credit for your work, a client's unfair criticism, a friend's passive-aggressive jab. The modern reflex is to fire off a reply, to stand up for yourself in the heat of the moment. But here's what Seneca knew: anger is a terrible editor. It drafts sentences you'll regret, amplifies slights into betrayals, and turns minor friction into lasting fractures. The 24-hour rule is your circuit breaker. It doesn't mean ignoring the issue. It means refusing to let your lizard brain dictate the terms of engagement. Try this experiment. Next time anger flares, set a timer, not for minutes, but for a full day. Let the email sit in drafts, sleep on the confrontation. In that space, something remarkable happens. The initial heat dissipates, revealing what's actually at stake. Often you'll find the offense was clumsiness, not malice, or you'll realize your anger was masking something subtler, insecurity, exhaustion, or old wounds the present moment merely brushed against. Seneca's insight was that time doesn't just cool emotions, it reveals their true origins. Now reflect, what past conflict would this rule have transformed? The friendship fractured over a text sent in haste, the career setback from an impulsive resignation. Anger thrives on immediacy. It convinces you that right now is the only possible moment to act. The Stoic alternative is to treat emotions like wine, best not guzzled straight from the bottle, but allowed to breathe until their true character emerges. This shift isn't about becoming a doormat. It's about recognizing that your sharpest weapon isn't speed, it's clarity. The person who waits 24 hours isn't weak, they're strategic. They know that words spoken in anger often require apologies written in regret, and they understand this paradox. Sometimes the most powerful response is the one you don't send. The 10th shift might sound morbid at first until you realize its true power. The Stoics practiced Momento Mori, remembering that you will die, but this wasn't about fear or morbidity, it was about urgency and gratitude. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now, let that determine what you do." The modern twist, it's not about dwelling on death, it's about letting that awareness sharpen how you live. Imagine waking up each morning with a quiet whisper, "This day isn't guaranteed. How will you spend it, not as a threat but as a clarifying lens?" Here's the practical shift. Instead of waiting for a near-death experience to jolt you into presence, build tiny reminders into your routine. An hourglass app that flips every hour, not to track productivity, but to ask, "Am I spending this hour like it matters?" A sticky note on your mirror, "What if this were your last month?" Not to spiral into existential dread, but to cut through the noise of trivial worries. The magic lies in the contrast when you stare at the hypothetical end. The things that truly matter snap into focus. That argument with your partner feels smaller. The inbox clutter loses its grip. The project you've been postponing suddenly demands your hands. Consider this experiment. For 1 week, start your day with a 2-minute ritual. Open your notes app and finish this sentence: "If today were my last, I'd make sure to." The answers will surprise you. Rarely do people write, "Check more emails," or "Scroll longer." Instead, it's calls unmade, apologies unspoken, or moments missed chasing things that didn't matter. The Stoics knew this secret. Confronting mortality isn't about dying, it's about editing. Stripping away the superficial to reveal what's left when time runs short. Now here's the modern trap to avoid. Memento Mori isn't a license for recklessness. I could die tomorrow, so max out my credit card. That's hedonism, not wisdom. The Stoic version asks a deeper question. If this were your final chapter, would you be proud of the story you've lived? It's the difference between binge-watching life and directing it, between drifting and choosing. So try this today. Pause mid-task, any task, and hit mental reset. Ask, "If I knew this were my last year, would I still be doing this?" The answer isn't always no. Sometimes it's yes, but with my full attention. The coffee you rush through could be savored. The walk you take distracted could be a sensory feast. Death isn't just an end, it's the ultimate prioritization tool. Because when every moment holds the weight of finality, you stop waiting for someday to live like you mean it. This shift isn't about darkness, it's about light. The kind that only shines when you stop pretending you have forever. The Stoics weren't fixated on the end, they were obsessed with the now. And that's the irony. Remembering you'll die isn't morbid, forgetting to live is. The 11th shift pulls your perspective up, way up, until the things that consume your daily attention shrink into insignificance. Marcus Aurelius called this the view from above, and it wasn't just poetic imagery, it was a mental tool to dissolve pettiness. Picture this: you're stuck in traffic, fuming over a missed meeting. Now imagine zooming out not just to a bird's-eye view of the highway, but farther, until the cars become ants, the city a speck, the continent a swirl of blue and green. From that vantage point, does the meeting matter? Of course, but does the fury? Probably not. That's the Stoic secret. Distance doesn't diminish what's important, it clarifies it. Marcus practiced this daily. In the chaos of ruling an empire, he'd remind himself, soon you'll be ashes or bones, a name at most, and even that is just a sound, an echo. Brutal, maybe, but also liberating, because when you adopt the cosmic perspective, you realize how much of your stress is self-inflicted, how many battles you're fighting that history won't remember and your future self won't recall. The coworker who slighted you, the trivial mistake replaying in your mind, the obsession with trends that'll be obsolete in months, seen from space, these aren't crises. They're dust motes in sunlight. Here's how to make it practical. Next time a problem feels all-consuming, pause, close your eyes and visualize Earth from orbit, a fragile blue marble hanging in darkness. Now locate your worry on its surface. Does it register? The bills, the gossip, the social media feud, they vanish at this scale. What remains? Likely the people you love, the work that gives you meaning, the handful of truth you'd whisper if today were your last. This exercise isn't about dismissing your struggles, it's about reordering them. When you see your life from this altitude, the trivial falls away, leaving only what deserves your limited time and energy. Try this tonight before bed. Ask, what did I treat as urgent today that won't matter in a year? The argument over dishes, the obsession with a competitor's progress, the hours lost to mindless scrolling. These are the ghosts that haunt modern lives. The view from above exercises them, because when you grasp how small your lifespan is against cosmic time, you stop sweating the small stuff. Not out of apathy, but from the profound realization that some battles aren't worth the heartbeat they cost. This shift isn't about nihilism, it's about focus. The Stoics weren't saying nothing matters, they were teaching us to separate the signal from the noise. So the next time you're drowning in the details, remember, the wider the lens, the clearer the picture. And from space, the only thing that truly looms large is how you choose to spend your fleeting sliver of stardust. The 12th shift cuts one of the most invisible puppet strings, the desperate need for applause. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's most influential teachers, put it bluntly. If someone told you that a certain person spoke ill of you, do not make excuses, but answer, he was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone. At first glance, sounds like self-deprecation, but dig deeper and you'll find a liberating truth. When you stop craving praise, you also disarm criticism. Think of an artist painting in a locked studio, knowing the canvas will never be seen. Every brushstroke becomes pure expression, no audience to impress, no trends to chase, no fear of rejection. That's the Stoic ideal, creating, working, living not for the roar of the crowd, but for the quiet satisfaction of knowing you've done your best. History's most enduring works often emerge this way. Emily Dickinson wrote nearly 2,000 poems, only a handful published in her lifetime. Franz Kafka asked his friend to burn his manuscripts. Their genius wasn't fueled by applause. It flowed from an inner fire that external validation couldn't ignite or extinguish. Here's the modern test. Imagine your next project, whether it's a presentation, a poem, or a business plan, will never be seen or judged by another soul. How would your approach change? Would you still refine it with the same care? Or would you cut corners, knowing no one would notice? The answer reveals how much of your effort is driven by genuine excellence versus the hunger for approval. Social media has twisted this further, turning every post into a subconscious audition, likes as standing ovations, follows as encores. But the Stoics knew a harder truth. If you only feel worthy when others clap, you'll feel worthless when they don't. Try this experiment. For 1 week, create something daily, a sketch, a journal entry, a meal with no intention of sharing it. Notice the freedom in knowing it doesn't have to be good enough. No filters, no performative depth, just raw expression. You might stumble upon a startling realization. The work you do for an audience of one yourself often carries more authenticity than anything designed for applause. This shift isn't about rejecting praise when it comes. It's about not needing it to begin with. There's a quiet confidence in the person who knows their worth isn't determined by a 5-star review or a lukewarm, "nice job." Epictetus trained his students to greet both praise and blame with the same question: does this person's opinion reflect reality? If yes, learn from it. If no, let it pass like weather, because the person you're becoming isn't sculpted by the hands of others, they're carved by your own standards, one indifferent stroke at a time. The 13th shift transforms one of the most corrosive emotions into fuel for growth. Envy becomes emulation. Seneca saw jealousy as wasted energy, writing in his letters, "That which you envy in another, take for yourself." But here's the modern twist. It's not about stealing someone's success, it's about reverse engineering their strengths until they become your own. Picture a colleague who effortlessly commands meetings while you stumble over words. The default reaction is bitterness or self-doubt. The Stoic alternative: study their technique like an athlete watches game tape. How do they structure their points? When do they pause for impact? What can you adapt, not copy, to elevate your own craft? This shift works because envy always points to desire. When you resent someone's promotion, what you're really craving is their competence or confidence. When you seethe at a friend's thriving relationship, you're acknowledging the depth of connection you want for yourself. The Stoics didn't deny these feelings, they mined them for clues. Epictetus advised, if you see someone doing well, examine your own hands. In other words, instead of fixating on their rewards, focus on the work that earned them. That viral creator you can't stop comparing yourself to, they likely spent years honing skills in obscurity. The neighbor with the pristine garden, their discipline didn't sprout overnight. Try this reframe today. Identify one person who stirs that prickly mix of admiration and irritation in you. Now ask, what specific trait or skill of theirs would I benefit from developing? If it's their charisma, commit to joining a local Toastmasters. If it's their financial savvy, enroll in that investing course you've bookmarked. The magic happens when you shift from "why them" to "how can I?" turning a rival into an unwitting mentor. History's greatest innovators practiced this relentlessly. Michelangelo didn't curse rival sculptors, he studied their chisel techniques until he surpassed them. Marie Curie didn't resent male scientists' access to labs, she used their published papers as textbooks. Even Seneca acknowledged learning from philosophers he disagreed with, writing, "I take what's useful and leave the rest." That's the essence of emulation, extracting the gold without swallowing the dirt. So here's your challenge. For the next week, when envy surfaces, greet it as a diagnostic tool. Your jealousy of a friend's discipline reveals where your routines are lacking. Your irritation at a coworker's praise highlights your own hunger for recognition. These emotions aren't flaws, they're compass needles pointing toward your next level. The Stoics knew that the person you resent today could be the mirror showing you who you're capable of becoming tomorrow. All it takes is the courage to see the reflection clearly and the discipline to act on what you see. The 14th shift comes with a built-in editor for your frustrations, the one-sentence complaint rule. Marcus Aurelius had a brutal standard for grievances. If it's not worth fixing, it's not worth mentioning more than once. Imagine applying that to modern venting sessions. The coworker who always steals your ideas, the commute that drains your will to live, the endless loop of minor irritations that dominate coffee break conversations. The Stoic approach isn't about suppressing annoyance, it's about refusing to let it overstay its welcome. Here's how it works. Next time you catch yourself rehearsing a familiar grievance, challenge yourself to distill it into a single, precise sentence. No embellishments, no dramatic retellings. My manager dismisses my input in meetings, full stop. Not only does this prevent emotional inflation, where a small slight balloons into an epic injustice, but it forces a critical follow-up question. Have I done everything within my control to address this? If the answer's yes and nothing's changed, the Stoic move is acceptance. If it's no, the sentence becomes a catalyst for action rather than a script for pity. Modern psychology backs this ancient hack. Rumination, the mental replay of grievances, activates the same neural pathways as the original stressor, essentially re-traumatizing you with each retelling. The coworker who annoyed you at 10 a.m. lives rent-free in your head until bedtime, all because you kept narrating the offense like an audiobook on loop. The one-sentence rule acts as a circuit breaker. Once articulated, the complaint gets two choices: escalate toward resolution or dissolve into irrelevance. No middle ground. Try this experiment. For 1 week, carry a notepad and tally how often you voice the same grievance. You'll notice patterns. Certain frustrations become verbal tics, repeated not because they matter, but because they've become comfortable. That's the hidden cost of chronic complaining. It doesn't just describe your pain, it reinforces it. Seneca warned, "He who suffers before it's necessary suffers more than necessary." Every time you resurrect a dead issue, you're volunteering for emotional overtime. Now apply the filter. Is your complaint about traffic actually about feeling powerless over lost time? Is your rant about a lazy teammate masking your fear of speaking up? The one-sentence rule doesn't just trim words, it exposes the root. And once you see the root, you can either pull it or stop watering it. Because the person you're becoming isn't defined by what bothers them, but by what they choose to do with that bother. Compress it into a sentence, then let it go or grow. That's the shift, not silence but selectivity, not no complaints, just no rehearsals. The 15th shift sounds counterintuitive at first. Why would anyone voluntarily imagine things going wrong? But the Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, and it wasn't about pessimism, it was about inoculation. Think of it like a fire drill. No one hopes for flames, but practicing the exit route means you won't freeze when smoke fills the hallway. Seneca put it plainly, what is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. Translation: surprises hurt more because they catch us defenseless. Picture this, you're rushing to the airport, already late when your phone buzzes, a notification that your flight's delayed. The modern reflex is frustration, maybe panic, but the Stoic shift kicks in when you've already rehearsed this moment, not obsessively, just clearly. You've asked yourself, if I miss this flight, what's my move? Maybe it's knowing the airline's rebooking policy, or having a backup plan to work remotely from the terminal. The rehearsal doesn't prevent the problem, but it defangs it. Suddenly, the delay isn't a crisis, it's a scenario you've already navigated in your mind. Here's the key distinction. This isn't catastrophizing, that endless, what-if spiral that leaves you exhausted. Stoic rehearsal is systematic and brief. It's the difference between imagining your car breaking down in vivid detail, the steam from the hood, the cost of repairs versus simply noting, if the engine fails, I'll call roadside assistance and use the wait time to catch up on reading. One drains you, the other prepares you. Try this today. Pick one upcoming event that's stirring anxiety, a job interview, a difficult conversation, even a vacation with unpredictable weather. Now ask, what's the worst that could reasonably happen? Not asteroid-strike absurdities, but plausible hiccups. Then go deeper. How have I handled similar situations before? You'll uncover a quiet truth. You're more resilient than you think. That time you bombed a presentation but lived to tell the tale. The friendship that survived an awkward confrontation. These are your proof points. The magic lies in the aftermath. Once you've walked through the worst-case scenario, not as a victim, but as someone who's already mapped the exit, something shifts. The interview isn't life or death. It's a conversation where you either succeed or learn. The delayed flight isn't ruinous. It's a chance to people watch with a coffee. Premeditatio malorum doesn't just soften blows. It reveals how many of your fears are paper tigers, roaring loudly until you step closer and see their hollow. So here's the challenge. Next time your stomach knots over an upcoming event, pause. Play the tape all the way through, not just the disaster, but your response. Because the person you're becoming isn't someone who avoids storms, but someone who knows they've packed an umbrella, and that changes everything. The 16th shift peels back the layers of who you think you are, not to diminish you, but to reveal how much more exists beneath the labels. Marcus Aurelius jolted himself with a daily reminder. You are just a soul carrying a corpse. Harsh, maybe, but strip away the metaphor and you'll find a liberating truth. Your titles, your possessions, even your achievements are costumes you wear, not the core of who you are. Modern life constantly confuses the two. Ask someone who they are and you'll hear, I'm a lawyer, or I'm a mom, or I'm the guy who runs the bakery. These roles matter, but they're not you. The Stoic challenge is this: who remains when the costumes come off? Try this exercise. Grab a notebook and draw 2 columns. On the left, list every title you hold. Your job, your relationship status, even informal labels like the responsible one or the creative type. Now, in the right column, answer, what qualities do I express when no one's watching? Not the you who shows up in meetings or holiday photos, but the you who stares out the window at midnight, who dances terribly to a favorite song when alone, who gets lost in curiosity without posting about it. That's where your essence lives. Marcus wasn't dismissing the body or responsibilities. He was pointing to the indestructible part of you that exists before and beyond them. Consider a CEO who defines herself by her corner office, only to crumble during retirement, or the athlete who can't fathom life after the jersey. These aren't just career transitions, they are identity crises. The Stoic antidote: practice saying, I am more than my job title, more than my bank balance, more than how others see me. When you internalize this, setbacks stop feeling existential. Losing a job isn't losing yourself. A failed relationship isn't proof you're unlovable. These events hurt, but they can't erase what's fundamental to you: your resilience, your humor, your capacity to begin again. Here's the modern test. Next time someone asks what you do, experiment with leading with something beyond your role. Instead of, I'm a teacher, try, I'm someone who loves unraveling complex ideas, or I'm the person who notices how light changes in the afternoon. Watch how it shifts the conversation and, more importantly, how it shifts your own sense of self. The label society gives us our shortcuts, but the Stoics knew you're not a shortcut. You're the entire uncharted landscape. This shift isn't about rejecting roles, it's about refusing to be confined by them, because the person you're becoming isn't just a collection of titles, They're the quiet, unshakable presence that holds them all lightly, ready to adapt without breaking. And that's something no promotion, breakup, or life change can ever take from you. The 17th shift hides in plain sight, those fleeting pockets of stillness we overlook 100 times a day. The Stoics didn't have smartphones buzzing in their pockets, but they understood something we've forgotten. Even the briefest pause can recalibrate your entire day. Imagine stepping into an elevator. Modern instinct says pull out your phone, scroll, fill the silence. But what if instead you let those 30 seconds stretch into a miniature sanctuary? No mantras, no guided breathing, just you, the hum of machinery, and the gift of not being needed for half a minute. That's the 2-minute Stoic stillness, not another task to master, but an invitation to stop mastering anything at all. This isn't meditation as you know it. It's far simpler and more subversive. While apps promise enlightenment in 10-minute increments, the Stoics recognized the power of micro-pauses. Seneca described them as scattered islands of calm in a stormy sea. Today, those islands are everywhere. The microwave countdown, the traffic light holding you in place, the buffer before a Zoom meeting starts. Each is an opportunity to step off the treadmill of constant reaction. The magic lies in their mundanity. Unlike formal meditation, which can feel like yet another item on your to-do list, these stolen moments carry no pressure to do it right. They're simply cracks in the day where you can remember who you are when you're not performing. Try this today. Pick 3 transitions you usually rush through, waiting for your coffee to brew, standing in a checkout line, sitting in your car after parking. Instead of reaching for distraction, stand still. Feel the weight of your feet on the ground. Notice the play of light on a nearby surface. Listen to the layers of sound around you without labeling them noise. These aren't wasted minutes. They're tiny acts of resistance against a culture that equates busyness with worth. The ancient Stoics would recognize them instantly, not as relaxation techniques, but as reclamation projects. Every time you refuse to fill silence, you're asserting ownership over your attention. Here's what changes when you practice this. Over time, those scattered pauses begin to weave together, creating an invisible lattice of calm beneath your day. The colleague who usually triggers you walks by, and instead of tensing, you catch yourself exhaling because 2 minutes ago, you let stillness reset your nervous system. The looming deadline feels less like a guillotine because in the elevator this morning, you remembered you're more than your productivity. This is how micro-stillness shifts you, not by eliminating stress, but by giving you fractional moments to remember that stress isn't the whole of who you are. So ask yourself now, where are the hidden seams in your day where stillness could slip in? Maybe it's the walk from your desk to the restroom, or the breath you take before answering a call. The places you've been treating as dead space are actually blank canvases, and in those small silences, you'll find something startling, the version of yourself that existed before the world started shouting. The 18th shift is a quiet rebellion against the cult of extraordinary, an invitation to find wonder in what we've learned to ignore. The Stoics called it ordinary gratitude, the practice of cherishing not just life's peaks, but its steady, unremarkable foundation. Seneca wrote letters describing his joy at the sight of fresh bread, the warmth of sunlight on stone, the simplicity of a friend's laughter. These weren't poetic flourishes, they were deliberate exercises in presence. Because here's the paradox, the more we chase euphoric highs, the more numb we become to the miracles already in our hands. Think of your morning routine. The clean water that flows with a turn of the faucet, a luxury ancient emperors couldn't fathom. The bed that cradles you, the shoes that don't pinch, the fact that you woke up without pain. These aren't small things, we've just made them feel small by expectation. the Stoic antidote, a mundane blessings list, not the usual gratitude journal tropes, family, health, job, but the invisible infrastructure of ease we've stopped seeing. The streetlights that let you walk safely at night, the clock that means you're rarely late, the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, keeping your food from spoiling. These are the unsung marvels of modernity, and they're hiding in plain sight. Try this tonight, before sleep. Name 3 utterly normal things you use today without thought. Maybe it's the elevator that saved you climbing 10 flights, or the Wi-Fi that connected you to a loved one's face across continents. Then ask the pivotal question, what would my day look like if this vanished? Suddenly, the mundane isn't mundane at all. That's the Stoic magic, not manufacturing gratitude, but uncovering what's already there. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, reminding himself, when you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. He ruled the known world, yet found awe in basics we scroll past. This shift isn't about ignoring life's hardships, it's about refusing to let them monopolize your attention. When you start collecting these quiet joys, the smell of rain on pavement, the weight of a book in your hands, the way your body knows how to heal a paper cut, something unexpected happens. The pursuit of more loses its grip. You begin to measure wealth differently, not by what you lack, but by the abundance you've stopped noticing. Because the person you're becoming isn't someone who needs a tropical vacation to feel joy. They're someone who finds it in the steam rising from their morning tea, knowing that right here, right now, they're already home. The 19th shift changes the voice in your head, not by silencing it, but by giving it a wiser, kinder tone. The Stoics practiced something we now call third-person self-talk, and it's simpler than it sounds. Imagine your best friend just failed spectacularly, a project collapsed, a relationship ended, a dream slipped through their fingers. How would you counsel them? Probably with patience, perspective, maybe even humor. Now here's the twist. What if you spoke to yourself that way? Marcus Aurelius did this constantly in his journals, referring to himself as you, as if giving advice to a younger sibling. You don't have to turn this into drama, he'd write. You have power over your mind, not outside events. That slight distance, treating yourself as someone worthy of the same compassion you'd offer others, changes everything. Take failure. When you bomb a presentation, the default inner monologue is brutal. I'm terrible at this. Why did I even try? But shift to third person and something unlocks. Okay, that didn't go as planned. What's one thing you can learn from this? Suddenly, the stakes feel lower, the path forward clearer. Research backs this up. Studies show people who use their own names or you, when self-coaching, handle stress better, make wiser decisions, even perform better under pressure. It's not magic, it's perspective. The tiny gap between I'm a failure and you had a setback is where growth lies. Here's how to practice it today. Next time you're spiraling over a mistake, pause. Picture your future self wiser, looking back on this moment. What would they tell you? Maybe it's this won't matter in a year, or what's the next right step? The key is to borrow their clarity. Seneca did this by writing letters to his friend Lucilius, advising him on struggles he himself faced. The act of framing his own challenges as someone else's allowed him to see solutions that felt invisible when he was stuck in his own head. Try this reframe. Instead of I can't handle this, ask what would your name do right now? That slight detachment isn't avoidance, it's altitude, like zooming out on a map to see alternate routes. The person berating themselves in first person is stuck in the ditch. The one speaking in third person is the friend offering a hand to pull them out. This shift isn't about pretending everything's fine. It's about recognizing that the voice you use in your head shapes the person you become. And the truth is, you're already giving great advice to everyone but yourself. So start today. When the inner critic shouts, answer it as you would someone you love, with honesty, but also with grace, because the person you're becoming deserves better than a narrator who only knows how to scold. They need one who knows how to guide. The 20th shift happens when the lights are low and the world is quiet, when the day's noise fades enough for you to hear your own thoughts clearly. Seneca called this the evening audit, a ritual so vital, he wrote, "The soul should be called to give an account of itself every day." But here's the modern twist. It's not about tallying wins and losses like a scoreboard. It's about asking 3 questions that cut through the clutter of busyness to reveal what actually moved the needle. What did I learn today? What did I waste? And where could I improve? These aren't judgmental probes. They're compass readings helping you course correct before tomorrow begins. Picture this. You're in bed, phone charging across the room, and instead of scrolling, you're reflecting. Not on the meetings or the meals, but on the moments that slipped beneath the radar. The conversation where you truly listened instead of waiting to speak. The frustration you navigated with patience instead of reactivity. Or the 5 minutes you lost to mindless clicking that could have been spent savoring your coffee. Seneca's version was poetic. When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent, I examine my entire day and measure what I've done and said. The modern equivalent might look less lyrical, a notes app entry, a voice memo, even a mental recap during your nightly shower, but the power remains the same. It's the difference between letting days blur together and treating each one as a standalone lesson. Here's how to make it practical. Set a 2-minute timer and answer those 3 questions with brutal honesty. Learn could be as profound as a new insight about your limits, or as simple as discovering a quicker route to work. Waste might expose that hour lost to social media comparisons or energy spent resenting a problem you can't control. Improve isn't about self-reproach, it's about spotting patterns. Maybe you'll notice how often interruptions derail your focus, or how postponing tough conversations leaves them festering. The magic lies in the follow-up. What's one lesson from today that I'll carry into tomorrow? Not a vague resolution, but a specific tweak, like muting notifications during deep work or asking for clarity sooner when instructions feel unclear. This ritual works because it's grounded in neutrality, not guilt. The Stoics weren't interested in self-flagellation. They were engineers of the soul, constantly refining their design. Think of your day as a prototype. Each evening's audit, it is a chance to adjust the blueprint. That argument you regretted, it reveals a trigger to manage tomorrow. The unexpected kindness you offered, it points to a strength worth cultivating. Even the wasted time becomes data, showing you where your environment or habits are working against you. Now consider the alternative. Without this pause, days stack like unread pages full of potential insights you never unpacked. The coworker's feedback that stung might repeat in every review until you address the kernel of truth in it. The small joy you overlooked, a bird outside your window, a stranger's smile, might keep fading into the background until you train yourself to notice. The evening audit isn't just about fixing flaws. It's about collecting the scattered gems of your lived experience before they're buried under tomorrow's rush. So tonight, before sleep takes over, try this. Close your eyes and replay the day like a film strip, not to critique but to curate. What's worth keeping? What's worth leaving behind? The Stoics knew something we often forget. A life well lived isn't an accident. It's the sum of small, deliberate adjustments, each evening's quiet reckoning steering you closer to the person you're quietly, steadfastly becoming. The 21st shift hands you a mental sieve, one that separates what deserves your energy from what's simply masquerading as obligation. Epictetus framed it as the dichotomy of control. Some things are within our power, while others are not. But the modern translation is sharper. Not my circus, not my monkeys. Picture this. Your coworker vents for the third time this week about the same problem they refuse to solve. The parent group chat erupts over a non-issue. A friend demands you take sides in a conflict that has nothing to do with you. The default response is to engage, to fix, to mediate. The Stoic alternative: ask one brutal question. Is this mine to carry? This isn't about apathy, it's about allocation. Every moment spent refereeing someone else's drama is a withdrawal from the energy reserves you could invest in your own growth. Seneca captured this when he wrote, "No person hands out their money to passers-by, but to how many do we hand out our lives? We'd never toss our wallet into a crowd, yet we routinely scatter our attention across battles that aren't ours to fight." The "not my circus" filter changes that. It's the mental click you hear when recognizing the difference between compassion and entanglement, between supporting someone and carrying their load for them. Consider the neighbor who knocks on your door fuming about the homeowners association. You could spend an hour dissecting bylaws you didn't write, or you could offer a sympathetic ear while quietly thinking, this is their fight. The first approach leaves you drained. The second preserves your peace without sacrificing kindness. Stoicism's genius lies in distinguishing between what's important and what's merely loud. That coworker's endless complaints, loud. Your child's anxiety before a test, important. The social media outrage cycle, loud. Your friend's genuine crisis, important. The filter isn't cold, it's clarifying. Try this exercise. List 3 current stressors. Now draw 2 circles, one labeled mine, the other not mine. Place each item where it belongs. You might discover that half your mental clutter consists of borrowed burdens, opinions you didn't ask for, problems you can't solve, hypotheticals that may never happen. The not mine pile isn't your responsibility to organize. This is Epictetus' dichotomy in action, recognizing that while you can't control external events, you always control what you let occupy your inner space. Here's where modern life distorts the lesson. We're conditioned to equate busyness with worth, to wear overwhelm as a badge of honor, but the Stoics knew better. When you stop volunteering as an emotional first responder for every minor crisis, something unexpected happens. You're not just freeing up time, you're reclaiming the mental bandwidth to show up fully where it counts. That's the quiet power of this shift. It doesn't teach you to care less, just to care smarter, because the person you're becoming isn't measured by how many fires they rush toward, but by how wisely they choose which flames are worth extinguishing. The 22nd shift hands you a telescope, one that lets you zoom past the chaos of today to see your worries from the quiet distance of 5 years. Marcus Aurelius whispered to himself, "You always own the option of having no opinion," but here's the modern application. When your stomach knots over a spilled coffee in a meeting or a typo in an email, ask one jarring question: will this even register half a decade from now? The answer isn't just comforting, it's a revelation. Most of what feels urgent today is forgotten by next Thursday. The Stoics didn't dismiss present struggles, they just refused to let temporary storms define the entire sky. Take a real-world test, that cringe-worthy moment when you blanked on a client's name during a pitch. Right now, it feels like a career-ending flub, but pull the lens back. In 5 years, will it be a footnote in your growth story, or will you even remember it without effort? This isn't about minimizing genuine challenges. It's about exposing how many of our daily anxieties are holograms, fears that look solid up close but dissolve under scrutiny. Seneca practiced this by imagining his future self looking back. What will I wish I'd spent less time worrying about? The answer always reveals the same truth. we overestimate the lasting impact of failures and underestimate the cumulative power of small, steady efforts. Here's where the magic happens. Apply the 5-year lens to something gnawing at you today: a missed deadline, a social slip-up, a project that didn't land perfectly. Now fast forward. Is this the moment that derailed your trajectory, or just a blip in a much longer arc? History's most resilient people share one trait: they treat setbacks as data points, not destiny. The entrepreneur whose first venture collapsed used it as a lesson that fueled their next success. The artist whose early work was mocked kept creating until taste caught up with their vision. The Stoics called this sympatheia the interconnectedness of all things, reminding us that today's disaster might be the exact pivot point future you needed. Try this reframe. Next time you're spiraling over a minor mistake, pause. Picture your future self at a dinner party, laughing as they recount this very moment as a turning point, or more likely, struggling to recall it at all. That's the 5-year lens at work. It doesn't erase present emotions, it simply puts them in perspective, because the person you're becoming isn't shaped by isolated stumbles, they're forged by the patterns you repeat over years. And when you start living with that long-view clarity, something shifts. The small stuff stops feeling so big, leaving room for what truly lasts. The 23rd shift pares language down to its bones because every unnecessary word is a tax on your attention and theirs. The Stoics didn't just value brevity, they saw it as moral clarity. Seneca warned, "Speech that's bloated and disorderly is a sign of a mind that's lost its way." Fast forward to your inbox today, that 3-paragraph email apologizing for a delayed response, justifying a simple request, or over-explaining a minor decision. It's not just wasting time, it's leaking power. The minimalist word diet isn't about being curt, it's about removing the verbal static that drowns out your signal. Take a mundane example. Compare. I just wanted to check in to see if maybe you had a chance to possibly look over the documents I sent over last week. No rush, though. With did you get a chance to review the documents? The first version reeks of hesitation, as if the sender is apologizing for existing. The second, clear, confident, respectful of both parties' time. The difference isn't just efficiency, it's psychology. Filler words, just, maybe, sorry to bother, act as tiny flinches, broadcasting insecurity before your message even lands. The Stoic alternative: say what you mean without dressing it in apologies. Here's the deeper layer. When you audit your own communication, you'll uncover patterns that reveal hidden insecurities. The colleague who CCs 3 managers on a simple query might fear appearing incompetent. The friend who prefaces every opinion with "this might be stupid," but has trained others to discount their ideas before they're fully voiced. Epictetus spotted this centuries ago. If you want to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid. His point wasn't to actually be ignorant, it was to stop performing uncertainty as a shield against judgment. Try this experiment. Scan your last 10 emails or texts. Highlight every phrase that serves no purpose except to soften, justify, or over-explain. Then rewrite one as Marcus Aurelius might, with precision and nothing extra. You'll notice something startling. The stripped-down version doesn't sound rude, it sounds assured. That's the paradox of minimalist communication. When you stop padding your words with nervous energy, people lean in rather than tune out. The practice extends beyond emails. Notice how often you verbalize thoughts that don't need voicing, commenting on trivialities to fill silence, or repeating points already understood. Zeno, founder of Stoicism, was known for his economy of speech. When a student rambled, he replied, "The reason we have 2 ears and 1 mouth is so we can listen twice as much as we speak." Modern translation, talk less, mean more. So ask yourself today, where does your language inflate from fear rather than necessity? Is it the habit of over-clarifying to avoid being misunderstood? The compulsion to respond immediately instead of pausing to distill your thoughts. Each unnecessary word is a tiny surrender of your confidence. The Stoic remedy is simple but profound. Let your words carry weight by making them few. Because the person you're becoming isn't measured by how much they say, but by how much their silence is respected. The 24th shift invites you to step into a thought experiment that bends time, living each day as if Seneca, Epictetus, or Marcus Aurelius were standing just over your shoulder. The Stoics called this prosoch, a heightened awareness where you act as if your every choice were being witnessed by the philosophers you admire. But here's the modern twist. It's not about performance or pretense. It's about creating a temporary container one day, 1 hour, to explore who you become when you consciously align with your highest ideals. Imagine today is your Stoic character day. You've decided to embody patience not as an abstract virtue, but as a lived experiment. The barista messes up your order, traffic snarls to a standstill, your coworker interrupts you mid-sentence, and instead of reacting, you lean into curiosity. How would Epictetus handle this? Not with passive resignation, but with the calm clarity of someone who knows irritation won't unspill the coffee or clear the road. The power lies in the temporary nature of the experiment. Unlike vague resolutions to be better, framing it as a time-bound role play lowers the stakes. You're not failing at patience, you're researching it. This practice reveals something startling. Most of us aren't one consistent self, but a collection of potential selves that emerge under different conditions. The you who snaps at a delayed flight isn't less real than the you who comforts a crying stranger. They're both possibilities within you. The as if experiment shines a light on that spectrum. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one," he wasn't demanding perfection. He was pointing to the transformative power of deliberate practice. Acting as if isn't fake, it's how neural pathways form. Every time you choose patience over irritation, you're not pretending, you're rehearsing a version of yourself that, with enough repetition, becomes second nature. Try this today. Pick one virtue: integrity, courage, resilience, and wear it like a cloak for a set period. In a meeting, play the role of someone who speaks truth with kindness. Facing a setback, adopt the mindset of someone who sees obstacles as training grounds. The key is to notice not just your actions, but the thoughts that arise when you step into this role. Do you feel like an imposter, a revelation? Both. That tension is where growth lives, because the person you're becoming isn't some distant ideal. They're the self you've already glimpsed in fleeting moments of clarity, waiting for you to invite them out of the wings and onto center stage. Here's the deeper question the as if experiment poses. Who are you when no one's watching, and what if someone always was? Not a deity or a dictator, but the wisest version of yourself, the one who knows your potential and gently holds you accountable. That's the true Stoic audience, not ancient philosophers judging from the past, but your own future self, nodding in recognition as you make choices they'll be proud to have lived. The 25th shift turns irritation into revelation. What if the very things that frustrate you are secretly sculpting your strength? Seneca called this loss as gain, the art of uncovering hidden advantages in apparent setbacks. Think of a traffic jam, the modern symbol of wasted time and frayed nerves, but through a Stoic lens, that motionless highway becomes something else entirely. An enforced pause in a world that never stops moving, a chance to listen to an audiobook you've been postponing, or even a moment to notice the sunset you'd normally speed past. The practice isn't about pretending discomfort doesn't exist. It's about mining it for unexpected gold. Consider how this reframe works in practice. Your flight's delayed, an inconvenience until you realize it gifts you 2 uninterrupted hours to draft that proposal. Your phone battery dies, a crisis, until you rediscover the pleasure of people watching in a cafe. Even deeper, these obstacles often serve as friction against life's autopilot. That coworker who constantly nitpicks your work, they're sharpening your attention to detail. The gym being overcrowded, it forces you to adapt your routine, preventing plateaus. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." The reverse gratitude list flips the script. Instead of resenting the labor, you start recognizing the muscles it's building. Here's how to make it tangible. Grab a notebook and divide a page into 2 columns. On the left, list today's annoyances: the slow elevator, the noisy neighbor, the last-minute cancellation. Now, in the right column, play detective. What might this be secretly offering? The elevator delay becomes a chance to practice patience. The noisy neighbor trains your focus amidst distraction. The cancellation frees up time for neglected priorities. This isn't wishful thinking, it's strategic perspective taking. Modern psychology confirms what the Stoics knew. Reframing isn't denial, it's cognitive flexibility, the mark of resilient mind. Try this today. Pick one inconvenience that's been gnawing at you. Maybe it's a home repair draining your budget or a social event you're dreading. Now interrogate it like a Stoic. What skill could this situation help me develop? The leaky faucet might teach you basic plumbing or the humility to call for help. The awkward party could hone your small talk stamina. Even exhaustion from sleepless nights with a newborn carries its own curriculum. Lessons in surrender, in finding joy amidst chaos, in discovering reserves of patience you didn't know existed. The magic lies in the follow-up question: how would I pay for these lessons if they came as a course? Suddenly, the traffic jam isn't stealing your time. It's gifting you a free masterclass in mindfulness. The difficult colleague isn't a nuisance, they're a live case study in emotional intelligence. This shift doesn't erase life's friction. It reveals how that friction polishes you into someone more adaptable, more observant, more at peace with unpredictability. Because the person you're becoming isn't forged in comfort, they're shaped by how creatively they use the grit life throws in their path. Seneca practiced this daily, writing, "No tree becomes rooted and sturdy unless many winds blow against it." The next time you're stuck in literal or metaphorical gridlock, remember, the wind isn't your enemy. It's the invisible hand strengthening your roots, teaching you to bend so you won't break. And that's a gift no calm day could ever deliver. The 26th shift pares life down to its essence, not by adding another philosophy to memorize, but by subtracting everything except a single, piercing question. What would you do if today were your only chance? The Stoics didn't need productivity apps or 10-step frameworks. They had this. Seneca wrote, "Every new day is a life in miniature." And here's why that matters. When you treat today not as a rehearsal for some distant future, but as the main event, your choices sharpen into focus with startling clarity. That looming project you've postponed, the apology you've been meaning to offer, the chapter you've wanted to write, suddenly, they're not items on a to-do list. They're the very things that would define your one and only day. This isn't hypothetical. Picture a sculptor standing before a block of marble, chisel in hand. They don't dabble or defer. Every strike counts because the material is finite. That's the only today mindset and awareness that time, like marble, can't be reclaimed once spent. The modern trap is believing we'll always have a later to correct course. But Marcus Aurelius warned, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, not as a threat, but as a lens to reveal what's truly urgent versus what's merely loud. Try this experiment. Pick one task you've been avoiding not because it's hard, but because it feels easier to delay. Maybe it's a difficult conversation, a creative project, or even a health checkup. Now ask, if I knew this were my last opportunity to do this, how would my approach change? You'll notice something shift. The excuses evaporate. The distractions lose their grip. What remains is the raw importance of the thing itself. That's the power of the daily mantra. It doesn't just prioritize your tasks, it sanctifies them. Consider how differently we'd move through ordinary moments under this lens. The commute isn't wasted time. It's a final chance to listen to your favorite song with full presence. The dinner with your family isn't routine. It's a last supper where every laugh is savored. Even the mundane becomes charged with meaning when stripped of the illusion of endless tomorrows. The Stoics practiced this not to incite panic, but to cultivate precision like an archer drawing a bow with the knowledge they only get one arrow. Here's where modern life distorts the lesson. We've turned presence into a buzzword, something to achieve between scrolling sessions. But the only today focus isn't about squeezing more from each hour. It's about wasting less of them on what doesn't align with your deepest values. Epictetus put it bluntly, you're living as if you're destined to live forever. The antidote, live each day as if it's your last to do this particular thing. Not in a frenzy, but with the quiet determination of someone who knows some chances don't come twice. So tonight, as you review your day, add one question to Seneca's evening audit. What did I treat as expendable that I'd mourn if today were truly my final chance? The answer isn't a guilt trip, it's a compass, because the person you're becoming isn't built in some distant future. They're shaped by what you choose to honor in the only time you ever really own. This day, this hour, this breath. And that changes everything. The 27th shift happens in the quietest corner of your awareness, the place where real growth lives but rarely gets celebrated. Marcus Aurelius called it the inner citadel, a private fortress where victories aren't measured in applause or promotions, but in the small, unseen acts of courage that shape who you become. Picture this: you bite back a sarcastic remark when provoked. You choose vulnerability over defensiveness in an argument. You resist the urge to check your phone during a moment of stillness. These aren't the stories you'll post about, but they're the battles that define you far more than any public achievement. The silent victory log isn't about ego. It's about bearing witness to your own evolution when no one else is watching. Think of it like a gardener's journal. The world notices the blooms, but the real work happened weeks earlier. The careful pruning, the patient watering, the days spent tending to what wasn't yet visible. Your inner citadel holds those notes. Maybe today's entry reads, stayed calm when the flight was cancelled, or spoke up in the meeting even though my voice shook. These aren't small things. They're the incremental reps that build emotional muscle. Seneca wrote letters to himself cataloging his progress, not his speeches or wealth, but moments he resisted vanity or practiced patience. His measure of success wasn't the crowd's reaction. It was the private knowledge that he'd shown up as his best self when it counted. Here's how to start your own log. Each night, name one act of quiet courage, not what you accomplished, but how you showed up. Did you pause before reacting to a provocation? Did you choose integrity over convenience? Did you sit with discomfort instead of numbing it? The entries don't need fanfare, they're for you alone. Over time, you'll spot patterns, the situations that test you most, the growth you've overlooked. That's the power of the silent victory log. It turns abstract ideals like resilience or discipline into tangible proof that you're already living them, even in tiny ways. Modern culture confuses visibility with value. We're trained to broadcast our milestones but mute our struggles, to curate highlight reels while ignoring the messy, beautiful work of becoming. The Stoics rejected that imbalance. Epictetus taught, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and clueless. Translation, real growth often looks unimpressive in the moment. The first time you set a boundary, it might come out clumsy. The first morning you resist snoozing your alarm, no one hands you a medal. But those are the wins worth recording, not because they're perfect, but because they're yours. So tonight, before sleep takes over, ask the question most of us avoid. What quiet growth have I overlooked? Maybe it's the fact that you didn't catastrophize when a plan fell through, or that you finally admitted, I don't know, instead of bluffing. These are the victories that don't trend on social media but ripple through your character, because the person you're becoming isn't built in the spotlight. They're forged in the shadows, one uncelebrated act of courage at a time. And that's the quietest, most powerful shift of all. So here we are, 27 subtle shifts, each one a quiet revolution in its own right, recoding your identity not through grand declarations, but through the silent recalibration of everyday choices. Think of them as tools in a Stoic toolkit, each designed for a specific kind of transformation. The chisel for carving out presence, the whetstone for sharpening resilience, the compass for navigating self-mastery. Together, they form a blueprint for becoming someone who meets life not with reactivity, but with intention, who sees obstacles as raw material and quiet moments as sacred ground. The thread running through all of them, a radical return to what's within your control, not the chaos of the world but the clarity of your response. Not the noise of others but the stillness of your own mind. Marcus Aurelius called this the art of living, and it's simpler than we make it. Presence isn't about perfection, it's about noticing when you've drifted and gently guiding yourself back. Resilience isn't about never falling, it's about remembering you've risen before. Self-mastery isn't about crushing weakness, it's about befriending it, understanding it, and choosing differently anyway. Epictetus left us with a challenge that cuts to the core. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. That's the heartbeat of all 27 shifts. They're not philosophies to admire, they're practices to embody. So here's your invitation. Don't try to master them all at once. Pick one, just one that resonates most right now. Maybe it's the 5-minute morning silence, or the evening audit, or the not my circus filter. Live with it for a week. Notice how it reshapes your days, your reactions, even your sense of who you are. And when you're ready, share it. Tell us in the comments which shift you're practicing, what it's revealing, where it's challenging you, because transformation doesn't happen in isolation, it thrives in community. If these ideas have sparked something in you, consider subscribing. There's always more to explore, more ancient wisdom to adapt, more quiet shifts to uncover. But for now, take this with you. You're not who you were yesterday, and tomorrow, that's being written in the choices you make today, one subtle shift at a